teaching and discovery come together.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, a look at the Apache helicopter crash, the cause of the first 2 U.S. casualties in the Kosovo conflict. Kwame Holman updates the pain and suffering from the Oklahoma tornadoes. Elizabeth Farnsworth talks with a group of Denver high school students about responsibility. And Terrence Smith discusses the discovery and the mystery of a body found on Mount Everest. It all follows our summary of the news this Wednesday.
Brought to you in part by ADM. Feeding the world is the biggest challenge of the new century, which is why ADM promotes satellite technology to help the American farmer be even more productive. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by Travelers.
You put $1 in your 401k. We invested it and helped you get a jump on your retirement. So instead of wondering about the future, now you can start looking forward to it.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
2 American pilots died today when their Apache helicopter crashed in Albania. They were identified as Army Chief Warrant Officers David Gibbs of Ohio and Kevin Reichert of Wisconsin. They were the first American casualties of the Kosovo campaign. President Clinton offered words of sympathy at an airbase in Germany. And back in this country, the first of many Kosovar refugees began arriving. Tom Bearden has our Kosovo summary report.
The Apache attack helicopter was one of 24 that arrived in Albania last month. It was on a night training mission.
The crash of the 2-person helicopter occurred about 1:30 a.m. A security element has secured the crash site. An explosive ordnance disposal team has been dispatched to aid in the recovery effort. There are no indications that hostile fire was involved.
Later, an Army spokesman said the helicopter might have collided with power lines. At the Pentagon, Major General Charles Wald was asked if the accident would make the Army more cautious.
From an operator's perspective, I don't think you can get any more cautious than we are of doing the job right. And what I say there is that the training missions they fly, whether it be Apaches, aircraft, or any other type of training, but now we're talking about aviation, is very demanding. It's got a lot of risk attached to it in peacetime as well as combat. I think there has been an average of 130 deaths in helicopters over the last 6 years in training incidents.
The news of the loss greeted President Clinton as he arrived in Germany for talks with NATO and meetings with American military personnel. Speaking to a group of servicemen and women and their families, Mr. Clinton said he knew their task was hard, but necessary.
When people throw away that understanding of our common humanity and make differences the only thing that matters, and make them so important they justified literally dehumanizing other people so that their lives, their children, their property, their history, their culture, even their faith in God do not matter. That makes life unbearable, and it makes civilization impossible. And that is what we are fighting against in Kosovo. If we want Europe to be undivided and democratic and at peace for the first time in history, and if we don't want your successors to have to come to this continent and fight another bitter war, then we must stand in Kosovo for the elemental principle of the common humanity of every breathing, living person in this continent.
The president also met with the 3 servicemen who had been prisoners of war earlier this week before their release by Yugoslavian President Slobodan Milosevic. The president reportedly also asked Secretary of Defense William Cohen what he might do about releasing the 2 Serbian prisoners of war. Cohen said they would be released shortly.
Right now, the International Red Cross is examining the 2nd prisoner, and as soon as they complete their examination, then I will review it and then make a recommendation. But I would expect within a relatively short period of time that we could see their release. This is not a goodwill overture to Mr. Milosevic. I don't believe Mr. Milosevic has made any goodwill overture to us.
Overnight, NATO bombs and missiles hit the airport in Pristina, Kosovo's provincial capital, and other targets in central and western Yugoslavia. The Alliance air campaign spared Belgrade, but the city was again without power. Serbian media blamed it on carbon fibers that earlier soft bomb attacks had scattered on power substations, shorting them out. Reports are that strong winds picked the fibers off the ground and blew them back into the power stations, shutting them down again. A relief convoy from the Greek branch of Doctors of the World came under fire while en route from Macedonia to Pristina. The group said there was an explosion about 100 yards away and no one was hurt.
There were two convoys, I believe, and what I've understood from talking to people in Europe is that they've reviewed every possible mission they can review, every tape they can review over that period of time, and there are no indications whatsoever that we attacked even close to one of those convoys, so we can find no evidence at all that has any truth to it, and from what I understand, the convoy people are in contact back to their own headquarters or their supervisors, and they don't know whether they were attacked from the air or the ground, so they can't even verify whether it was an air attack.
Ethnic Albanians continue to flee Kosovo by the thousands, so many people that Macedonia closed the border this afternoon. Reports are that some 1,500 refugees were turned back. In Kukës, Albania, tent cities have become home to 30,000 refugees, but they may not be permitted to stay there much longer. The UN is considering shutting down the camp because the border has seen repeated shelling from the Kosovo side.
Unfortunately, we're too close to the border. We don't know what the other side is going to do here. We are within artillery range, and it's our duty to ensure that people which we take in our care are safely accommodated elsewhere.
The problem is the refugees don't want to leave. They're hoping to connect with family members left behind. The UN Refugee Commission is also worried about how long the refugees may be displaced.
We're very concerned about this operation going on through the winter, what it means if we reach September and the refugees are still out in all of these countries, having to winterize the camps, many of them tented camps. As one of our colleagues has said, or maybe more than one who are on the ground out there, if we get to September and we haven't solved the problem, then Milosevic has won this war anyway.
NATO Commander General Wesley Clark echoed those concerns, noting that crops have not been planted and whole villages have been destroyed. This morning, the first batch of 453 refugees bound for the U.S. boarded buses in Macedonia and later a chartered 747 to begin a 13-hour journey to New Jersey. The U.S. has agreed to accept 20,000 Kosovars on a temporary basis. The jumbo jet touched down at McGuire Air Force Base at 4:20 Eastern Time, and the refugees slowly disembarked. Local and state officials lined the tarmac to greet the new arrivals. Most of the refugees showed little emotion, although some of the children seemed excited. They boarded 11 waiting buses to take them to nearby Fort Dix, where they will be greeted by First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. They will be housed in dormitory-style rooms. Each will receive welcome kits, including soap, shampoo, and a towel. Playrooms have been set up with board games, basketball nets, and big-screen TVs. Another room will serve as a place of prayer for the mostly Muslim refugees. Many of the signs at Fort Dix have been translated into Albanian, and the cooks have taken crash courses on Albanian cuisine. Albanian-speaking counselors will be available to help deal with the trauma of relocation. The refugees will be allowed to rest all day tomorrow before meeting with immigration officials and undergoing medical checks on Friday. Fort Dix will be their home for about 2 weeks until they're resettled with relatives and sponsor families around the country.
We'll have more on the Apache helicopter story right after this news summary. Residents of Oklahoma and Kansas tallied the time and costs of rebuilding today. A string of 76 tornadoes swept across their states late Monday and early Tuesday. The same front generated twisters in Arkansas and Texas late yesterday, killing one person and thus raising the death toll to 44. We'll have a full update later in the program tonight. Senators confronted managers of the nation's nuclear laboratories at a Senate hearing today. They said repeated warnings about one scientist, Win-Ho Lee, were badly handled. Lee was fired from Los Alamos under suspicion of spying for China. Here's an exchange between the committee chairman, Alaska Republican Frank Murkowski, and Los Alamos director John C. Brown.
You do not have any security arrangements that would
eliminate the possibility of Mr. Lee or anyone else going in, taking secured information, putting it on a chip, and walking out with it and either putting it on his own computer or leaving it in his pocket. Is that right?
If someone is taking the information from a classified computer and downloading it onto a medium like it's probably not
computer,
whatever it is,
yeah.
And puts it in their pocket and walks out the door, the only protection you have is random searches that we do.
This is incredible to me that this kind of exposure exists, and it's so readily available. I mean, this is where the horse went through the door.
Well, this is one of the areas that I think everyone is vulnerable from the insider threat, is the question of whether you take it out in whatever form you happen, whether it's magnetic medium or
I think with the national
paper.
security interest of the country at stake here relative to our weapons system, you know, everybody should be subject to search if it's necessary.
Brown said lab employees are subject to random searches, and he said security and counterintelligence were improving. Two groups of climbers and their guides reached the peak of Mount Everest today. They were the first to do so this year. 3 Americans were among them. Renewed interest in the climb came last Saturday when the body of British mountaineer George Mallory was discovered. He died on the mountain in 1924. Researchers are trying to determine if he was the first to make it to the top, and not Sir Edmund Hillary 29 years later. We'll have more on the 1924 expedition at the end of the program tonight. Between now and then, the Apaches, the tornadoes, and reflections on responsibility. The Apache helicopter story, Tom Bearden begins.
The Apaches arrived in Albania nearly a month after they were requested by the NATO commander, delayed by bad weather, a shortage of airlift capacity, and the need for more crew training. The angular AH-64 attack helicopters bristle with guns, missiles, and rockets. They're designed to kill tanks, armored personnel carriers, and troops. Apache units played a major role in the 1991 Gulf War, destroying more than 500 Iraqi tanks, hundreds of armored personnel carriers, trucks, and other vehicles. Tactically, the Apaches hug the ground, fly down ravines, duck behind hills, hide behind trees. They search for their targets from concealment and launch Hellfire missiles to hit them from as much as 4.5 miles away.
Army aviation operates in the ground environment. We utilize the same terrain features as a tank, an armor unit, or an infantry unit would. We operate from the ground regime. We use terrain to our benefit to ingress into the enemy.
Each Apache, with a crew of 2, can carry up to 16 Hellfire missiles. They can also carry 75 unguided Hydra rockets to attack troops in large areas, and 1,200 rounds for the swivel-mounted 30mm automatic cannon. The Apache sensor systems allow it to fly and fight both day and night in all kinds of weather. It makes for a very lethal package, and a vulnerable one. As last night's crash proved, flying at night is dangerous even when no one is shooting at you. This is the second night training accident since the unit arrived in Albania. In the first crash, the crew suffered only minor injuries.
The way we train is we train at night under blackout conditions. We train in a demanding environment because in the long run, this method of training will save lives and accomplish the mission, and that's really it. The bottom line is, again, you cannot take the risk out of this business. We're flying in mountainous terrain, unfamiliar terrain.
That terrain can also conceal a host of threats, from soldiers with rifles to portable surface-to-air missiles.
And to Colonel Michael Hackerson, an Apache pilot and Chief of Army War Plans at the Pentagon, and Thomas McNauer, a senior policy analyst at RAND, a research organization. He served in the Army in Vietnam and as a reservist during the Gulf War. I spoke with them earlier this evening. Colonel, first, what can you tell us about what happened last night?
Well, Jim, there's not much that we know right now that's been reported back here in Washington. Apparently, what we do know is that there was a crew of 2 on board, a CW-3, a very experienced pilot, and CW-2.
That's Chief Warrant Officer.
Chief Warrant Officer 3 and a Chief Warrant Officer 2. The aircraft, what we have right now apparently is it did burn after the accident. The team that's investigating the accident will have a lot more information in the future on it.
But it was a nighttime training mission, correct?
It was a night training mission conducting in preparation for operations to go into Kosovo.
What is known about what the weather was?
I don't know at this time. That's part of the decision process the commander goes through, but I don't have a weather forecast of what it looked like in the mountains.
Has enemy fire been completely ruled out?
I really don't know at this time. That is one of the things. The area that they're in is a bit of a hostile environment in that it's a northern area of Albania, but I don't really know much more than that about it.
Now, there are 24 Apache helicopters there. Now, 2 of them have crashed. Is this considered a normal percentage of failure among these Apaches?
Actually, it's really an anomaly because for the last 3 years we've had no fatalities, and that's at flying over 100,000 hours a year. So in the total span of the aircraft's lifetime, we've flown well over 1 million hours and had a total of 14 fatalities. So this is something we'll look at very closely because it is truly an anomaly.
Yeah. Do you see it that way too, Mr. McNair?
Yeah, and we don't know the story, but I do think that it probably has something to do with the general risks of bringing in Apaches. I mean, these aircraft survive by staying low and by moving fast. They're training very hard at night to do that, and there's just a lot more to run into down close to the ground than there is at 10 or 15,000 feet. So I don't think we should be entirely surprised. These people are pushing the edge of the envelope in their night training, I think, probably pretty hard.
And why do they do that? Why is it necessary to do that?
Well, as I say, you know, I think they're not going to survive with electronic suppression. They're going to survive by hiding in the terrain and by moving fast. And to do that in Kosovo, you've got to do it in the mountains around Tirana to practice.
Now, Colonel, much has been said about these Apaches. As Tom Bearden said in the setup, it took a while for the request to be processed, took them a while to get there, and they've been there a while, and they still have not been introduced into any combat situation, and there have already been 2 accidents. So is there a problem with the Apache that we should know about?
No, actually, the unit that is down there right now is very well trained. It had been in Bosnia, had been then back to Europe for about 7 months, and is returning then back into theater. So they're very familiar with the environment, and they were ready to go. The challenge you run into is moving a large force like that into a very austere environment. What we've seen is, I mentioned to several folks, it's parking patience, because the airfield they're going into in Tirana is also the primary airfield for humanitarian support. So what we've been sequencing in, the commander forward has been deciding the priority between moving a force protection force in and then moving in humanitarian assets to make sure they take care of the folks on the ground. The aircraft were ready to go. Now, they will also take advantage of this time to continue their training, because I used to tell a lot of folks that hard is not the kind of training we do. Hard is coming back telling someone that I've not done some of the training I needed to do. So they're forward, they're taking advantage of this time, and when called on, they will be going into combat.
Mr. McNair, what is your analysis of why it's taken so long? At least from a layman's point of view, it seems like an awfully long time between, hey, we need Apaches, and hey, when are they going to start actually doing something?
Look, I think the problem is less with the Apache than with our conception of what we want here. The guiding principle here of this operation so far is to keep casualties to a minimum, to 0. I think everyone understands if you go to ground war, you're not going to be able to do that. The Apache is sort of nibbling at the edges of ground war. It's an aircraft, but it's an instrument of ground warfare. It's going to be used, I think, outside the normal realm of its doctrine, although Colonel Hackerson knows a lot more about this. It's going to be used without ground support, without ground spotters, deep strike into an area where the enemy isn't all that heavily armed, but where there is clearly an air defense threat. And I think, you know, there's probably, whatever the logistics problems that have taken time setting this up, there's probably been an operational problem. How do we want to run this operation in a way that minimizes our risks? And that takes time to put together.
You agree? Is that true, Colonel?
It does take time, and in the environment that we're operating in, which will be across the border, even though there aren't ground forces forward.
Across the border from Albania into Kosovo.
Even though there aren't ground forces, we practice to also work with the Air Force. And so one of the things that I think you'll see is what we call joint air attack training, or joint air attack, where we'll work with the Air Force. What we provide them is a very precise look at targets, the high-value targets that we're going to be finding, armor and armored vehicles and artillery, or even command and control nodes. What we provide is an eye on the target, a precise laser to designate it on a common code, which the Air Force can then launch missiles, or we can launch our own missiles to make sure that we have an identified target, to cut down on any chance of further casualties for anyone in the battlefield.
But Mr. McNauer, isn't there something just inherently more dangerous about a helicopter, mechanically and otherwise, than there is a normal aircraft flying at 15,000 feet?
Well, I do think when you're close to the ground, there's just a whole heck of a lot more to run into, especially at night going fast.
Less ground.
And a lot less reaction time. And you can't punch out of a helicopter the way you can a fixed-wing aircraft. You know, my concern here
Meaning you can't bail out. There's no time because you're too close to the ground.
Well, you can't do it anyway, even if you were at 10,000 feet. But you don't have many seconds before you hit the ground, so there's very small reaction time here. Now, there's more risks that go with putting in the Apaches. I think those risks go up the more you start snooping around looking for the paramilitary groups that are actually doing the harm. I realize that we want to take out Serbian tanks, but I don't think what's really happening here, the harm being done to the Kosovar Albanians, is being done largely by tanks. It's being done by people, paramilitaries from the Serbs, and those are the people that you want to go after. I think the Apache can do that better than anything we've brought to bear yet, but only if it's willing to go in and snoop around and look for them, and that raises the risk, because the minute this aircraft slows down to look, it becomes a little more vulnerable.
You're an Apache pilot yourself, Colonel. Is there any doubt in your mind that all of these folks who are flying these Apaches in Albania know exactly what that risk is?
They do, and that's our biggest focus for all these years, is to mitigate that risk. We've operated in the same environment, even a more lethal environment in the old Soviet regime, because we trained to go against Soviet-style forces deep in their rear. So we've mitigated a lot of the risk with survivability equipment on the aircraft, learning a lot of lessons even as far back as Vietnam. As an example, when you talked about survivability of the aircraft, the Apache is the most survivable aircraft out there today.
Why is that?
It's designed for a couple of things.
You've got one here. Yeah.
The drivetrain of the aircraft is designed to withstand a hit from a 23mm anti-aircraft gun and keep flying to get us back to friendly lines. The engines are separated much like an A-10, because that gives you the ability, if one engine is knocked out, to fly on one engine. An A-10, another ground attack aircraft, which also has the engines separated so that they can, if they lose one engine, fly on the other one. And with that, and the seats and armor plating is throughout the aircraft, a trade-off of weight for armament protection, primarily for the crew and key weapons and engine systems. And then on top of that, we've designed the aircraft because normally if it fails, it will drop vertically. So this aircraft is
just straight down
if everything fails. If it does that, this aircraft is designed to be dropped 3 stories and the crew survives and walks away. Witness the other night when the crew...
That's what happened in that case.
That's right, and they walked away and they're back for duty. So it is designed specifically to be the most survivable aircraft in the world today. We build aircraft, but we grow pilots, and that's our challenge, to take care of the crews and make sure we get them back.
Mr. McNauer, do you think because of these 2 accidents out of 24, there should be a reassessment of the use of these Apaches in Albania in this Kosovo situation?
No, I think, for better or for worse, it's what you have to expect. We are now going into a somewhat higher risk period of this conflict. On the other hand, as I said a moment ago, we are going to bring to bear a form of firepower on the actual perpetrators of violence in Kosovo that I don't think we've been able to do. So the good news is we will be able to actually influence what's going on, the harm being done to Kosovar Albanians with the Apache. The bad news is the risks go up, and I think I don't know what caused the training accidents, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's a reflection of the increased risk, the need to train more rigorously.
Do you expect, Colonel, for there to be a kind of, hey, wait a minute, let's look at this again before these Apaches are actually employed in combat because of this unusual situation?
You know, we constantly look to mitigate the risk, and so what they will be doing in the unit is analyzing the risk, figuring out if there's anything else that they could do. They have a very extensive checklist of the things that we go through, looking at maintenance of the aircraft, survivability, proficiency and matching of crews to the aircraft. And so they'll be looking at all of that, looking at the terrain, the environment, to make sure that they've minimized all those risks. We had a very similar period just before the beginning of ground operations in Desert Storm. I was the aviation planner for 3rd Army. And as you see pilots getting into this very potentially hostile environment, they tend to train even closer, tighter. What you're seeing is like any sports team, is they'll settle down now. They'll be ready to go. They'll have looked at this. It's a very tragic accident, but at the same time, you'll see a confidence that'll build. This is a very tight brotherhood of aviators.
But these 2 accidents isn't going to make them wary, isn't going to make them, isn't going to scare them a little bit?
It's a reminder that if they want to be old aviators like me, they'll take a good look.
Okay. Well, Colonel, Mr. McNair, thank you both very much.
Pleasure.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, a tornadoes update, reflections on responsibility, and a body on Mount Everest. Kwame Holman has the tornado story.
The same storm system that spawned Monday's deadly twisters in Oklahoma and Kansas unleashed tornadoes last night in Arkansas and Texas. One woman was killed in Texas, 20 people were injured, more than 100 homes were destroyed, and thousands were without power. Officials now say 76 twisters swept across 5 Plains states Monday, killing 43 people and leaving nearly 2,000 families homeless. In southwestern Oklahoma, thousands of residents were allowed to return to the remnants of their homes today. Officials lifted a nighttime curfew in the hard-hit communities around Oklahoma City and more.
Today, they're going to go in for the first time, and they're going to see that it's in rubble, and we're going to see the emotion. We're going to see them crying. Yesterday, I went in and I saw some of the people that walked up on their house, and the emotions range from wailing and crying to laughing. People were actually laughing. I guess that was just the way that they were dealing with it.
National Guardsmen helped residents sift through the debris for whatever personal items could be salvaged.
First day to get back in here and see what is salvageable, if anything, and we'll go from there. I don't know what else to, I mean, we're all kind of taking one step at a time, I guess.
There's 5 generations of stuff in this house, and it's not worth anything. This is what's worth something.
The Oklahoma counties of Grady, Garvin, and McLean, which comprise much of Congressman J.C. Watt's district, were among the hardest hit.
We've seen everything from a 2x4 being stuck in the side of a cross on a church, over 250 mile-per-hour winds, to horses dead between 2 parked cars. It's been pretty fascinating. And of course, you can see the backdrop here. It's pretty devastating.
An insurance industry group estimated insured losses in Oklahoma and Kansas will exceed $500 million. Up to 3,000 homes are believed destroyed in Oklahoma alone. Rescuers continued searching for more victims in the rubble, but said they did not expect to find any more survivors. There were no reports of how many people remain unaccounted for. Emergency relief officials spoke about their efforts this afternoon.
If you're in Oklahoma City right now, you'd see that the infrastructure is up, the water's running, the lights are on, the sewer systems are working, the fire department's there, the police department's there. It's the augmentation of the state government and the federal government that's coming in to help get those things up and going. So they're doing a very good job in that process.
Currently, we have over 300 personnel in the field that are assisting the state and local government get back on their feet, both not only the local governments but individual disaster victims. Some of the things we're doing on the response side is we're providing emergency communications, we're assisting debris clearance through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we're providing disaster medical teams, we've got disaster mortuary teams in there to help identify and recover the dead. In addition to that, we're providing some emergency power, which it looks like hopefully right now we won't need. And we were looking at providing some water and ice, which again it looks like is being provided through community sources.
Our first response to any disaster of this kind is to provide sheltering and feeding to the victims that whose homes have been destroyed or have any sort of damage where they cannot remain in their homes. So we've had people in the field from the very beginning providing the shelter and the feeding. We have gotten some help in Oklahoma with 2 Baptist kitchens. The Salvation Army has 8 to 10 canteens helping us out. And the American Red Cross has 8 emergency response vehicles, and we hope to have a total of 31 there. These vehicles go out and provide feeding to people who are trying to do cleanup in the home and to rescue workers. We've had shelters open throughout. The count jumps up and down as people come and go and find family members and friends to stay with. We have over hundreds of people, hundreds of volunteers and paid staff who are local, who have been trained to respond to these kinds of disasters. But we've also been recruiting over 500 people so far from across the country to come in and help and assist with this effort.
Clouds and showers were predicted across the southern plains tonight, but no more tornadoes. Now, the first of two Elizabeth Farnsworth discussions about responsibility in light of the Littleton, Colorado school shootings. She talked with a group of high school students in a Denver cafe last night.
Thank you all very much for being with us. I want to know what's changed in your schools and in your lives since the killings at Columbine. How about you, Summer? You go to a school here in Denver, not a suburban school. What's it been like at your school since what happened in Columbine?
Pretty much it's been the same. Our security's always been tight. We've had to wear IDs. We've been checked. Security doesn't know who you are. You don't get to come in the school. We've only been able to come in one door, so everything's pretty tight at our school. Other than that, we're getting back to normal. It was pretty tense. A lot of people were pretty scared.
We're about 7 miles away from Columbine, and we are their biggest rival in basketball. And I've talked to several kids who go to our school because it was such a traumatizing thing for them. And a lot of them aren't necessarily scared of the stereotypical people that were brought up with the trench coats and everything. They're just scared because they know it might happen in our school.
And why? What's happening in kids' lives that this could happen?
I think everybody looks at it as an isolated incident, but I mean, all of the shootings that have happened recently in other states, I mean, at the first killing that happened, why didn't we decide this is incredible, what are we doing wrong? Kids are going through things that they're not talking about, that they're bottling up inside. Kids are taking their anger out on other people and through weapons and through guns because of whatever reason, and I think they needed to realize that then. I don't think this is very isolated.
Okay, so realizing this now, Maggie, in your school, what's your responsibility to try to make sure that this doesn't happen in your school? What can you do?
Well, the only thing I think I could do is if I heard something was going to happen is to go tell a teacher or an advisor. I don't really think there's much else I could do.
Some of you have actually intervened to stop things. Rita, you have.
Our main concern is gang activity. And there's a Burger King right across our school, right across the street. It's just a few steps away. And we were driving through it, and we saw two kids walking. They were walking through the back parking lot, and all of a sudden, just cars just rushed out. Just kids jumping out of the trucks, jumping out of cars, some with metal bats, wooden bats, chains. And I just sat there and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to kill him. If they get a hold of them, you know, they're going to kill him. And my first reaction was I got in the car and I turned the car back on and I just like drove into the crowd because I figured, you know, they're not going to want to get run over, so they're going to get out of the way. And they did, and as soon as the kid who was going to get hurt, as soon as he saw that, he got up and he started running. And I caught up to him and my friends like, get in the car, and I took him home.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that now we're still talking about danger, trying to act to prevent something bad happening? Do you think that people will act more quickly now?
It depends on the type of danger. If it's something like, well, if it's something they feel they can prevent, probably. If it's something like somebody running through with a gun, if the kid has their back to him and they've got the gun.
How about if you just hear a threat?
Well, lately, since this happened, you've heard tons of threats from, not direct threats, but things from people about, well, the school's going to blow up on April 16th, and you have to try to distinguish what's just talk and what's actual fact.
Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
Well, I think distinguishing between talk and fact, I think it's really hard. I mean, there are two things we have to realize about teenagers. Number one, we're not all-knowing. We don't know every weirdo at our high school. And number two, we're not police. And we can't say, you know, that somebody's perfectly harmless and distinguish someone from someone like Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold. And so I think anytime there's a situation that is potentially dangerous to someone else or dangerous to yourself, I think we need to be really careful and blow the whistle if there's any even slightest suspicion that something's getting serious.
But I sense that you're saying that there's just a limited amount that you all can do, that other people have got to really step in here and do something about this. All right, let's pursue this. Do you have people to go to? Let's say you do hear a threat or you have a sense that somebody's in trouble. Is there somebody that you can go to that you trust?
No, I honestly don't think so.
Why?
There are certain teachers at our school who do care a lot, but there's some, because they've been teaching so long and have seen so much, or for whatever reason, just would rather not deal with it. then of course, you know, the administration's not supposed to deal with problems like that, so they hand it over to the counselors. And the counselors are never there to talk to you. If you're lucky and you have a problem, what you can do is fill out this pretty little pink slip, and then maybe, just maybe, within 3 days they'll get back to you.
I believe you can talk to your parents. You can talk to a family member. You can talk to friends of the family. It doesn't always have to be in the school. Most of the time, things that you talk about in the school are overlooked, like at Columbine. So talking to your parents might get things out more. If you have communication with your parents or other people outside of school, things might get taken care of.
Do you feel like your parents know what's happening with you, that they understand the conditions of your school and your
my
life?
school, we don't have that much parent activity unless it's report card pickup night. That's the only problem at my school. Other than that, that's the only time. Well, my mom, she knows what happens with me because she talks to my counselor. She goes and checks up on me. Is she in school? She goes and checks to make sure I'm in school, and she talks to them. With my mom, she knows what's going on in my school, and I have a relationship with her. She's like my friend. I could tell her, you know, if someone's picked on me, I could tell her. If I'm picking on someone, you know, which I don't anymore, but, you know, I go and tell her, yeah, I was, you know, picking on this one and this and that. But she knows what's happening. But I feel that many of the parents at my school don't know.
Do you agree with that, Caleb?
I don't know if parents really know what teenagers are like to see any kind of warning sign. I mean, you know, they'll say on the news, they'll put a list of warning signs, and you can see that and say, you know, most teenagers act like half of those, you know, half the time. And so I think as far as you have to, I think it comes down to personal responsibility, parents and for kids. If you know your kid, then you know what's going to be going on. Be in your kid's life, be in his life. Don't just sit back and say, you know, he's a teenager, he's going to do stuff. If something occurs to where you know somebody's going to hurt somebody, or you know somebody's going to hurt themselves, then you need to take it on yourself and find somebody to tell. I don't think you can sit back and say, you know, if there's nobody to talk to, I'm just going to let it slide, because, I mean, in any kind of situation, especially something like this, what are the consequences? What is the price that you pay for sitting back and not doing anything?
Mark Whitney, you play sports. You're also what's called a peer counselor. What responsibility do you have to intervene to prevent harassment of kids? Now, apparently some of these kids at Columbine had been picked on. People said that athletes picked on them. Do you have a responsibility to stop that?
Before I would have said no, because I never saw it as that big of a problem. I mean, it happens in every school. I was talking to a kid who just transferred to my school, second semester from Columbine, and this was the 2 days after the tragedy happened, and he was talking about how he felt guilty because he was one of the kids that really harassed Dylan and Eric, and it made me think that if I can stop, because a lot of my friends are the people that do it. We're the jocks. I'm not proud, and they're not. I don't know if they're proud of doing it or what, and I don't know why they do it, but it gives me more of a responsibility to step in and say that's not right. To ask them why they're doing it, to stick up for the kid that they're picking on. I never thought of it as a responsibility before, and I don't know if that's necessarily the whole reason that Eric and Dylan did that, but I can at least now try to stop something from happening by stepping in.
I mean, it happens at all your schools, right? This happens. Do you all have this feeling that if somebody's really being picked on, you'll do something about it?
Depends kind of on who they're being picked on by.
How big they are.
If you've got like 4 guys going after some freshmen and they're all big football player wrestlers, and then you got me, there's not much I can do except run my mouth and run away from him and hope they chase me instead of him.
And I think you could at least make them aware, though. You don't necessarily have to stop them, because yeah, we are big, football players, but a lot of us are not going to take actions as far as someone's telling another person to stop. Even if they keep on doing it, at least they know that someone else is out there caring about that person. And that person that's getting picked on knows that someone cares about them.
Those of you who have been picked on, give us a sense of what it's like. Summer.
I was going to say, I was picked on throughout middle school, and I think it just takes a different type of person. It depends on how strong you are. For me, I was very strong. If I got picked on, I would try to brush it off, but it was always in the back of my mind.
What's been your experience?
I have gone through, not in recent years, but in my past, heavy name calling and ridicule from my peers. People didn't even want to be seen around me until about 4th grade when I actually did start getting friends, because I would try to make friends, but nobody wanted anything to do with me. And being a social outcast like that at that early an age, especially to the point where some of the teachers even ridicule you and go along with what the rest of the children are saying, it gets to you and it makes you cold and bitter to the point where, yeah, you don't care about it anymore when you're older, but it leaves, you know, in the way you think, in your reactions to things, it desensitizes you to a point where I don't think any media or any song or anything else can ever do. And I still feel it today, but I brush it off. But it's an intricate part of what made me the person I am today.
So you had some understanding of the kind of anger that Klebold and Harris had.
I do, because it rips people up differently, and it affects everybody differently. And there is a point for everybody where you will snap. For me, I never reached that point, and I probably never will, but for them, they did. And something had to be going on there that really, really pushed the right buttons, you know, to get them to do this. Because, I mean, you don't just wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to go shoot my classmates. I'm going to go pipe bomb up the school. You don't just wake up one morning and figure that out. Something has to develop over years and years and years that leads up to something like that.
And, you know, I think people make the mistake of thinking that it's just kids of the alternative cultures or whatever that do feel this pressure in high school. But I think it's safe to say that anybody in high school feels extreme pressures on all sides of the media, on all sides of their friends, and all sides of anybody going to high school. Anybody, even the most popular kids in school.
Is this true? Is everybody agreeing with this?
Yeah.
You feel just lots of pressure.
Life is hard, but we just have to deal with it. We don't have to go take it out on anyone. We have counselors in school. We have our parents at home.
Yeah, but that doesn't help when someone decides to start taking stuff out on you. And you can brush it off at the time, but then when you go home, you're like, what's so wrong with me that nobody really wants to be around you?
Finally, do you get the feeling, Kira, let me ask you, that there will be some real changes because of what happened at Columbine? Or do you get the feeling it's something that there's a lot of interest in right now and it'll just disappear?
I have the feeling that it will die down, because this is human nature, to mourn for it and to go through it and to experience it while it's happening. And then as soon as it's gone, it's gone.
I think that in Colorado it won't die down. I think that there's always going to be the security, how it is in schools, where you can only get in through the main doors and all the other doors are locked. I think throughout the country it won't, though. I think it really has to hit home for you to realize how serious it is. And I mean, like, it's not just with the schools, like, not like locking the outside doors. It's with, like, parents, like, paying attention to their kids and kids not picking on kids. I mean, it goes a lot further than just security and things like that.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for being with us.
Tomorrow night, Elizabeth will have a similar discussion with some Denver area parents and teachers. Finally tonight, a very new angle to a very old Mount Everest mystery, and to Terrence Smith.
It was June 1924. George Mallory and his team set out to be the first to conquer Mount Everest. But they vanished near the summit. Whether the Englishmen made it to the top or not remains one of the great mysteries of the mountain. Now, 75 years later, an expedition has discovered Mallory's body on a rock ledge some 2,000 feet below the summit.
The remains were conclusively identified in the surrounding area investigated by our team.
The team still hopes to answer Mount Everest's most famous riddle, whether or not Mallory reached the summit. The key to the mystery may be found in a primitive Kodak camera carried by Mallory's companion, Andrew Sandy Irvin. The expedition is still searching for Irvin's body. Kodak says the cold may have preserved the film. If Mallory is found to have reached the 29,000-foot summit, Sir Edmund Hillary, honored along with Sherpa Tenzing Norgay in May 1953 as the first men to scale the world's highest peak, would lose the claim.
For 45 years, people have regarded me as the hero of Everest, so I've done pretty well anyway, so I couldn't complain too much if Mallory had proved to have actually reached the summit.
After resting for a week or so at base camp at 17,000 feet, the search team intends to climb Everest again in what they hope will be a final effort to unravel the mountain's mystery. Joining me is mountaineer and filmmaker David Brashears, who has climbed to the top of Mount Everest 4 times. He, too, has searched for the remains of Mallory and Irvin and made it a film entitled Everest, the Mystery of Mallory and Irvin. Brashears' new memoir about mountain climbing and filmmaking, just out this week, is entitled High Exposure. David Brashears, welcome. As someone who has searched himself for Mallory, do you find this evidence conclusive?
Well, it's conclusive evidence that they've found Mallory, and it confirms what we've known all along, that Mallory's body did come to rest somewhere high on the slopes of Everest 75 years ago. And it's also this discovery is a tremendous tribute to the research team that's been up there working so hard and has been partially funded by the Nova Science series and the BBC. It's just, it's really exciting. I didn't expect to find myself quite so excited about the discovery of George Mallory.
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that they found a body in the vastness of Everest?
Well, there have been some very important clues over the year. This isn't a needle in a haystack. They're not searching all sides of Mount Everest. In 1933, a team of British climbers following in the footsteps of Mallory and Irvin discovered Irvin's ice axe lying on a slab on the route, on a traversing section of the route, much like a low-angled slate roof. No climber would leave his ice axe behind. So this ice axe could only be the site of an accident. You don't just put it down and leave it. You don't leave your boots behind. So it was a matter of following the fall line down this short cliff, this 300 or 400-foot cliff, to a terrace, a low-angle snow terrace about the size of a football field, and looking there where we assumed the body would have stopped. Another clue came out in 1975 when a Chinese climber trying to climb the North Ridge via the North Col wandered out onto that terrace, not really looking for anything, and came back and commented to his companion that he had found English dead. Unfortunately, 4 years later, when he reported that information to anyone who could really take notice of it, a Japanese climber, before he could fully explain it, he was killed the next day in an avalanche. So those were our 2 clues which led the team to be able to search not the entire mountain for Mallory and Irvin, but really a fairly described area.
Well, this body was found some 2,000 feet, rather, down from the summit. So here's the $64,000 question. Was he on his way up or his way down?
And that is the question we still cannot answer. We have found a body. By looking at a body, what can we learn? Well, we've learned from what I've heard from reading the NOVA website and from listening to reporters who've called me and been speaking to the climbers at base camp. We've learned that Mallory's had a broken leg and other injuries, so that he fell. It was an accident, approximately where we thought there was an accident. Whether he was going up or down, there is no evidence on his body to let us know that. When you die in an accident like that, you can't be a Captain Scott in your tent in the Antarctic writing a note to your wife about your imminent death, maybe before, after you've already reached the summit. The real clue, and what they are really looking for, more than a body, is the camera, the Kodak vest pocket camera that Mallory or Irvin was carrying.
And if they find that camera, because of course the team is going to go back up to that area and search for Irvin and search for the camera, What is it possible that that film could be still good?
Well, what we found out when we were going to Mount Everest in 1986, I was going there with a friend who'd researched this quite extensively, Tom Holzel. He contacted the Kodak Corporation, and they said, this is an ideal environment to preserve film. If that small camera, and it was small, it fits into a man's vest pocket, if it's undamaged, meaning no light has fallen onto that exposed film, in that thin, dry, cold air, the unexposed image should be preserved. And they gave us careful instructions to wrap it in special foil, seal it in a plastic bag, keep it cool, and return it to their laboratories for processing. So if on this next time up, and this is going to be very exciting over the next week, if they find the camera and there is an image on it from the summit, and I think that's maybe not too likely, but if there is, they should be able to print it.
There was one other clue as I also read the website and the accounts of the searchers. They found Mallory's snow goggles tucked in his pocket. What does that tell you?
Well, it could mean a couple of things. To me, the mountaineer, it means a man descending maybe in near darkness or in heavy cloud. And we do know that they were last seen halfway to the summit before heavy mist and a snow squall came in. Generally, though, I would wear my goggles in a snow squall to keep the snow out of my eyes. So if they were coming down in the evening on this low angle but treacherous terrain, once again like a slate roof, easy to slip on and start tumbling in a fall you can't stop, then say a half an inch or inch of snow had fallen. They're exhausted, sleep deprived, dehydrated, hypoxic. One of them slips on the slick surface in the dark and pulls the other off. People often have accidents, tired and less focused on the descent. Now, could he have had a pair of goggles on that fell off when he fell and been carrying a spare pair in his pocket? I think that's not where you carry your spare goggles. And I think he only had one pair. And the fact they're in his pocket means it was probably late in the day.
He was found, the body was found dressed in a tweed suit and wool and cotton parka. I wonder what that says to you, a mountaineer, about climbing then and climbing now.
Well, we hold those great early British climbers in the highest regard. I'm almost awestruck by their achievements back in the 20s. And it's not really about the clothing they wore. They're like us. Their flesh freezes at the same temperature. The wind makes them just as cold. They climbed later in the year, and Mount Everest is at the same latitude as Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And in early June, with that Himalayan sun right overhead, it can actually be quite comfortable high on Everest. You know what really makes me marvel about those early pioneers is every step they took was into the unknown. They had great faith in their equipment. Every explorer of that day takes the best equipment of the day. But well, they knew nothing about high-altitude physiology. They didn't know really a lot about the weather back then, and they didn't know what was on that ridge. How hard would it be? So they were really just really brave, spirited men with a great attitude.
In just a few seconds that we have left, how does this make you look at either Everest or Mallory differently?
You know, the amount of respect I hold for those early mountaineers hasn't changed at all. It will change if there is a picture of Mallory or Irvin on the top. All I can say is for this next week, I am going to be tuned in or glued to my computer and the NOVA website and see what they find next.
David Brashears, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Again, the major stories of this Wednesday. 2 American pilots died when their Apache helicopter crashed in Albania on a night training exercise. They were the first American casualties of the Kosovo campaign. 453 Kosovar refugees arrived at Fort Dix, New Jersey, with thousands more to follow. And tornadoes in Arkansas and Texas killed 1 person. 43 people died in twisters Monday in Oklahoma and Kansas. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Brought to you in part by ADM. Feeding the world is the biggest challenge of the new century. ADM is promoting soil conservation so history doesn't repeat itself. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by Solomon Smith Barney.
Will you ever say, fill her up with hydrogen? One thing's for sure, opportunities abound. Let's get to work. Solomon Smith Barney.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
On tomorrow's Morning Edition, we'll cover the day's news, national, international, and Northwest. And you can always expect a little something different, too. Join us between 3 and 9 a.m. on OPB Radio.
Video cassettes of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1. This is PBS.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you. And by the following. By a Northwest tradition of solid investment management, Columbia Funds, helping you meet the future with confidence. OHSU, where healing, teaching, and discovery come together.
The French lost more men in Vietnam than the Americans, or that the Tet Offensive, which destroyed America's faith in the war, was actually the worst defeat suffered by the communists. Now comes a series that tells what really happened, in the air and on the ground. Battlefield Vietnam.
On OPB, Thursday at 10. Join OPB for 100 hours of the best programming about the 20th century. From Model Ts to Apollo 13, women's rights to civil rights. Tape these programs and create a personal library of great moments from the last 100 years. Sundays from 10 till noon through the month of December.
And she was being pushed and pushed and pushed. I don't think she was eager to take that fight.
There is her own puzzling disregard for such obvious professional necessities as knowing the Morse code or how to operate a radio.
There was a lack of focus. She simply was not preparing properly for it.
It was the disappearance of Amelia that created the legend.
Funding for
Roll back! New rolling back prices all over the store. Just look for Smiley to save even more. Walmart. Move them out. Roll back. Always low prices. Yeah! Always.
You've heard of people building shelters to survive this Y2K thing? Wow, two-ply. You guys are prepared. But don't worry, because at your Kia dealer, we know Y2K really means yes to Kia. And you can get $1,000 cash back on a new Sportage. So instead of stockpiling gourmet delicacies like this...
Don't touch the meat.
You can be stockpiling Kias. Get $1,000 cash back on a new Sportage at the Yes to Kia sales event. Y2K breath spray. That's a must.
New Country, JJ 99.5. It's the latest. It's also the great.